Hi, this is Ken Parker welcoming you to another episode of Common Ground, the policy roundtable where we discuss issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to the show, let's review the format. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once, with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of agreement. At the end of the segment, I put in my 2 cents on the topic and give an assessment of how we did at finding common ground. Now tonight, it will be particularly easy for me to select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly for reasons that will soon become obvious. In fact, I will elaborate right now. We have a very special topic tonight, which is the override and debt exclusion ballot questions, which will be on the ballot, I believe, March 14th of this year in a special election. On the ballot before then for people who choose to vote by mail or to vote early in person or vote early at City Hall. So that's on March 14th. There will be 3 questions, 2 debt exclusions and 1 operating override, all of which are within a category of tax increase ballot questions, though it'll be voted on citywide in Newton. Now, there are organized campaigns for and against the override, and I have been working diligently on behalf of Common Ground viewers to try to make sure we have a diversity of opinion on this panel. And I'm pleased to report that we were successful in locating 2 panelists who have views that differ from one another's, a supporter and a neutral panelists, but the opposition campaigns, the no override campaign, had some difficulty identifying a person and asked instead that I read some of their materials, which I will do at the appropriate time during the show. So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's fabulous panel. We're joined by school committee member Kathy Shields. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you for having me on your show, Ken.
Thanks so much for being here. Now, Kathy, you are a school committee member from Ward 7,
yes.
Elected at large citywide. How many terms have you served on that council?
I am in my 3rd term, the beginning of my 6th year on the school committee.
And how are you enjoying that so far?
It is always interesting work.
I can imagine. It's interesting, I think, would they say, in China, that may you live in interesting times is considered a curse.
My colleagues and I have referred to it as the pie eating contest where the winner gets more pie.
Which is exactly what you want at that point, right. There's a scene in the movie Stand By Me that comes to mind.
But all kidding aside, it's been a very busy year. There's a lot going on in the schools, and not only do we have this question that we're going to be discussing this evening, but at the same time, we are in the search for a new superintendent. We're negotiating with our unions. We've got some budget pressures in front of us. So it's a busy time.
I've occasionally been asked if I wanted to run for the school committee, and I'm like, oh, that's the job where you get to cut people's favorite program from the budget and then redistrict their kids to a school they don't want to go to. Sounds like a great gig. Oh, and then when you negotiate contracts, you get to be hated by the teachers and the parents at the same time. What could be better? So yeah, that is a great job. Thank you for doing. No, seriously, it's thankless, but I really appreciate your volunteering the time.
Thank you. It's important. I've got 3 kids in the system, so I've got skin in the game and will for a long time to come.
And Kathy, your day job is you work at the Securities and Exchange Commission as an attorney?
I do. I'm a trial lawyer.
In the enforcement division.
That's right, yes.
So we will not be trading stock picks at all around this table tonight.
No investment-related misconduct.
I don't have any.
Fortunately, right. Yeah. So anyway, thank you again. Tariq Lucas, welcome back, Tariq.
Oh, it's been a while, Ken.
Yeah, did we just calculate that this is your 6th time on the Common Ground panel?
I believe it's my 6th, yes.
Well, you know, you're only 4 away from getting to host at that point.
All right. All right. A couple more years.
Yeah, and only 27 away from getting you're getting your picture on the mug.
All right.
We'll have to do a new mug then.
Can't wait.
At that point.
Can't wait.
But Tariq is a city councilor at large. I almost said alderman because in my day we were aldermen, but city councilor at large from Ward 2,
Yep.
which is basically Newtonville.
Newtonville, yeah.
But
basically.
at large, so you're elected by all the voters of Newton.
All the voters in Newton, all the wonderful voters in Newton.
And tremendously wise voters to put
Yeah.
both of you on the
Yes.
on the various bodies,
Yes.
the city government. And Tariq, how many terms have you served?
This
now?
is my second term, and you can call it my third year.
Starting off your third year on the
Yeah.
council. And let me ask you this. Don't you work for like some little school over in Cambridge? doing your
Yes,
day job?
an Ivy League school in Cambridge. I this fall will be my 15th year.
Wow.
Same job, same desk, same telephone number, same email address. Yep, been there 15 years.
So, and what do you do at Harvard?
I am the royalty specialist for
publishing
Harvard
division?
for Harvard University Press.
So you get to,
I pay people money.
you're probably loved by everyone that you.
I am. Yes, I am. It is actually tough work, but yes, I like it when I get an email or a phone call from an author and when they say, "Thank you so much for sending my check. It finally arrived in the mail."
It's better than the other call. Like, where the heck's my check?
Oh, I get those too.
All right. Still using the mail though? Hasn't Harvard figure out about like direct?
Oh
deposit
yes,
yet?
so we Harvard is doing direct deposit, but some people still prefer that, that paper check in the mail, and
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it. I know those folks.
Yeah.
So, great segue from talking about money to talking about the questions we have before us on the ballot. So, the obvious question, of course, is like, what's the point in voting? Why would anyone want to raise their taxes, right? That's why would we want to pay more taxes, and how much more would we be paying? So, just so there's three questions, and I'm just going to go over what they say. The first question is an override. Now, what that means is it allows the city of Newton to increase taxes by a larger amount than it ordinarily would. So we have a total levy, which I believe is about $407 million now, which is the total amount of property taxes that the city raises. Every year, the city gets to, under Proposition 2.5, a statewide ballot question that passed in 1980, gets to raise taxes by 2.5%, plus something called new growth, which is based on large-scale development or significant development that takes place in the city. So it ends up being 3-point-something% once you figure in the new growth. 2.5% of $407 million would work out to about a $10 million, a little more than $10 million increase in taxes, according to my calculator. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about an override of another $9,175,000. So above that 2.5%, almost another 2.5%. So we're talking about an increase of close to 5%, and then plus the new growth. So maybe we're talking 6-ish%. And then we have these. So that's the operating override. We also have the debt exclusions, and the debt exclusions are, unlike an operating override, which goes into the base, debt exclusion says we're borrowing money, we're going to pay for our project, and when we're done paying for that project, the tax increase goes away. So it builds up, it covers the debt payments over the course of the time that of the bonds, yes, the borrowing. And so there's two of those, one for Countryside Elementary School, the other for Franklin Elementary School. The Countryside one is let's see, $2.3 million, and the Franklin is 3.5. I think one of the reasons why the Countryside one is smaller is there's some state matching funds that are available through the School Building Assistance Bureau, and those are for school renovations, and Kathy can tell us all about what's happening with those. So the bottom line is there's three ballot questions. The operating override would provide funds for city operations, which includes, of course, paying people's salaries, which includes, of course, paying teachers' salaries. And so the city includes the school side as well. So with that having been said, I'm going to ask Kathy to actually let's go to the debt exclusions first, if we can. Can we pull that up as the first topic? Let's talk about what's needed. So Kathy, can you talk a little bit about what's going on at Horace Mann and Pierce and why they need? I'm sorry, Franklin.
Franklin and Countryside.
Yeah, sorry. Why am I saying Horace Mann? Right. Franklin and Countryside and why we need additional work there. What's going on?
Sure. So both of those schools are each one is the subject of one of the two debt exclusion questions. So these projects would fund basically complete replacements of those schools. The price tag for a new elementary school these days is roughly in the neighborhood of about $60 million. For the Countryside project, we applied to this state group called the Mass School Building Authority, or the MSBA, which has agreed to accept Countryside into its program. What that means is that the state will kick in about $20 million of the cost for that project, provided that the city of Newton obtains a dedicated funding source for the rest
So
of
we
it.
lose out on the $20 million if the debt exclusion for Countryside doesn't pass.
That's right, we do. And that's a significant contribution. It's roughly a third of the cost of
It's
that
about
building.
$60 million for
It's
an
about a
elementary
$60
school
million.
these days?
Yeah, it is. I mean, inflation and construction costs.
And this is, where would the new Countryside be built?
So that's part of the Mass School Building Authority process, is looking at the site plan. It would be built within the confines of that area. It probably would not be built on exactly the same footprint of the existing school. That school is sort of plagued by flooding problems. And if you look at the topography of that site, there are probably far better positions on that site to place a new school.
And then where the school is now could become a playing field? or-
Exactly. So the construction, part of that construction process is looking at the feasibility of various different site placements and site designs. And so as the project continues, there's a project architect, an owner's project manager, and they will be looking at and vetting all different kinds of designs to put a new building on that site.
So in effect, if the debt exclusion for Countryside doesn't pass, we would have to borrow more money, which down the road is going to use up more tax dollars.
Absolutely. And it would likely delay that project significantly.
Because it would take longer to raise that amount of money.
Exactly.
Okay. So that having been said, let's use our format. And what should we vote for this?
Absolutely. That building, I don't know if you've been on one of the tours, but that building is in significant need of replacement. It floods routinely. It's primarily modular classrooms that have long since exhausted their useful life. And the design of that building doesn't allow us to deliver the kinds of educational services we provide today.
Tariq, what do you think about that debt exclusion?
I agree with Kathy on this one. We have to support a new Countryside school. If we vote no, we would be throwing away free money. $20 million is, as you said, is about a third of the cost. A no vote on this means we're throwing away free money, essentially. And we do need a new Countryside school. I was on a Zoom call with some teachers from Countryside School the other day, and they told us about the condition of the school. I don't know if this is true, but this is what I was told. A weasel made its way into the school and was running around the school. I kid you not, Ken. I kid you not, Kathy. That's what we were told. We have to support
But
it.
what kind of weasel? Because I learned,
I didn't ask. I
Are there
didn't ask.
different kinds?
Yes, an
I
otter, for
didn't
example,
ask.
was in the weasel family, and otters are so adorable. So if an otter actually showed up in the school, at least and showed up at Mason Rice, I'm sure my 6-year-old daughter would be delighted by the cute otter. That, of course, you need a lot of,
given that it's
you
in
need more
wetlands.
flooding though, yeah, to get the otter. in
That's
there.
that's what we were told. And yes, we need a new Countryside school. Period.
Okay, so
that is
This was
not,
an easy
yeah,
one, right?
That
We put
was,
this one
yeah.
first. There's not. I haven't heard a lot of opposition to this, but to give their due to the No Override Newton people, they are opposed to this, and what their argument is that the city has lots of one-time money from COVID relief funds and free cash. I'll talk more about what free cash is later, but and I guess ARPA funds. So I guess my question to the panel is then, why not just use this? It's a one-time expense. Why not use this one-time money?
I don't think the city has anywhere near enough one-time money to pay for a $60 million elementary school.
Yes, it is $60 million, but there's also going to be interest on the bonds as well. So, but even then, we don't have $60 million in free cash, and the federal COVID money, there are earmarks and restrictions on how that money can be spent. So it is, you can't use that money just to fund a new school. It just doesn't, the math doesn't work that way.
So I think we have common ground on this one.
I think
so.
I think
I'm
we
gonna
do.
let's go to the other debt exclusion. Now, Franklin Elementary School, that's a $3.5 million debt exclusion. Again, about a $60 million school, Kathy?
Right. The cost of both schools is the same. The difference in the contribution or the difference in the amount for the debt override is simply the Mass School Building Authority is kicking in for Countryside but not for Franklin.
Why is that?
So the Newton Public Schools applied to the Mass School Building Authority for both projects. But the Mass School Building Authority is faced with demands from districts all around the state. And so they choose which projects they'll accept. I think while not a hard and fast rule, I think it's highly unlikely that they would be funding multiple projects in Newton at the same time.
You know, and the program originally, though it was underfunded, was automatic for all schools when it was this SBAB was first created. Anyway, footnote to history: it was changed under a Republican governor who cut the program to be optional on their part. But anyway,
Which one?
this could be a long segue. You know, anyway, I know we've had a couple of those. Anyway, the question, I guess, for the panel, let Tariq go first this time. Okay, here there's no free money.
No free money.
Are you still for this one, Tariq, or what do you think?
It's a little bit more money, but yes, I am still for a new Franklin school. I mean, Franklin School, I mean, I drive down Derby Street from time to time. I can see the school. We definitely need a new Franklin school there. We just need to. The school is fallen on very harsh times. The inside of the school is beyond to the point where it needs to be renovated. It's time for a new school at Franklin, period. And we have to pass the override we have to pass the ballot question. It's not an override, Ken.
You're so smart, Tariq. You know that debt exclusions are not a type of override. They're a different animal, a different type of local ballot tax
yes,
increase.
we have to pass it to get a new Franklin school, because if not, we are just kicking the can down the road, and it will probably be more expensive, and it will delay the project.
Is there also an equity? I'll let Kathy go, but it just seems like an equity issue too.
We'll go on.
But,
I mean, I think there's a huge equity issue across all of our school buildings. I mean, we have some fantastic new school buildings that we built with funds from the last override in part. And we've shown, I think, the city.
Zervis and Ainger, you mean? Or?
Zervis and Cabot, I believe, were the projects funded in the last override. In addition, the city, out of its own funding, paid for Ainger. And the Newton Early Childhood Program, which just opened its doors and is paying for the Lincoln Elliott Project, which the city has committed to fund as well. But even with those school building projects, we have a lot more that really need work. In addition to Franklin and Countryside, we'll talk about this later, but the Horace Mann School needs a lot of work. And then beyond that, we have to look at what to do with our other very old school buildings like Ward and Underwood, which are both close to 100 years old. So it's not like fixing Countryside and Franklin is the end of the road. We've got
Even
a lot
if we
of projects
had $60 million
beyond that.
over the next bunch of years, it couldn't be used that way. All right. I mean, I guess I'll put my 2 cents in on these debt exclusion questions. I appreciate the sense that people have that these are tough times, but and that a lot of people are struggling to make ends meet, but we derive a lot of our value in Newton, and one of the main reasons people move to Newton is the quality of our schools. Our property values are closely linked to the quality of the public education. So I really think it would be cutting off our noses to despite our faces not to maintain good school buildings, and we'll talk later, good teaching. But then the question is, well, could we do this with other funds, with one-time funds? And I I looked at so this is the No Override website. They say, well, Newton's got tons of free cash this year, and this is tiny print and hard to read, but they say it's $28 million of free cash in 2023, and it was only $12 million in 2022, and they show, I mean, I don't know if I can get this on the camera, but you can see, big increase. This is not true, because free cash is first of all, it's neither free nor is it cash. It's unallocated fund balance, but it gets allocated over the course of a year. So if you look back and say, okay, what is the 2022 number at the equivalent point in time a year ago? Well, gosh, it was something like $38 million. It went down to $12 million because it was used to fund the capital improvement plan. And I've got the city report here. So right now, by the way, the 2023 number is down to $24 million from $28 million because funds were just spent on fire engine number 7, sidewalk clearing tractor, building demolition, 4 hybrid police cruisers, and Newton South High School track, an area work. So, but a year ago, this number that the no override people say is only $12 million actually was $38.8 million. That was the free cash certification for fiscal year 2022. So it's very deceptive to say, there's more this year. At the beginning of the year, there's more, but it will go down over the course of the year until that number ends up being just the small balance that we maintain so that we don't default on don't bounce any checks, so to speak, over the course of the year.
It's the reserve.
Yeah, and it gets carried over to fund the next year's free cash, so it's not like it's wasted in some way. Anyway.
And also just want to say that if the mayor does want to spend any of the free cash, it does need city council approval for some of those projects that you did mention on there.
Well, the city council should play a very active role in the development of the capital improvement plan because under the charter, it's the city council's primary responsibility. I know that over the years, mayors have gotten into the habit of just handing the city council a capital improvement plan, and city councils have gotten more and more in the habit of rubber stamping it. But not to say that you would rubber stamp anything, Tariq, but I've noticed that has been a pattern.
Well, if you remember last year during the budget season, the budget was voted down by the council, but it still passed.
Yeah, well, the capital improvement plan, the city council has full ability to amend, to cut from one area to add to another area, and yet has rarely exercised that in recent years.
We did approve it without any
amendment.
Yeah, without any amendments.
See, back in the day. Anyway.
All right. Let's not
digress too much. The point is, though, that's just about prioritizing capital projects. That's not about doing more or fewer capital projects. It's about the city council asserting itself a little bit. But anyway.
We do that.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear it. On your 7th show, we're going to talk about that, okay? Come back and we'll... all right, thanks, Tariq. So my view is we need modern buildings, modern infrastructure, and it ends up costing more the more we delay. So, if you don't replace the building sooner, then you end up with like leaky roofs and more damage, and environmental disasters with boilers, and things just get bad and worse with old buildings. So better to replace them sooner rather than later.
Can I add just sort of an anecdote that sort of feeds on that? So the school committee, one of the things we do every sort of January, February, March is we go with the superintendent to visit the PTOs at each school to sort of hear from the families in those communities what's on their mind. And the Zervis PTO just had its meeting with the superintendent and school committee, and a lot of what the parents were talking about there is what a huge difference that new school has made, not only for the kids in the school, but for the neighborhood and the community. Because these new school buildings play host to a lot of different kinds of community events. They have ways of bringing people together. And the property values, at least according to the parents who were there, the property values in that area have gone up because it's just such an asset to that community that it really builds, it is more than just a place to send your kids every day.
Indeed, it is. The schools have, in fact, the high schools have there's a swimming pool at North that community uses. There's the there are many theater events and things that bring the community in, and a lot of schools. And anyway, let's. I think we've talked pretty thoroughly about the debt exclusions, and I believe we have 100% common ground around this table.
Which is rare. Which is rare.
Perhaps not with our phantom third guest from the No campaign. I don't know whether he or she is persuaded at all, but maybe if they're sitting at home, they can send an email and let us know whether they found any of this persuasive, that maybe they don't want to throw away $20 million in state matching funds at least, or have inequitable situation where Countryside is done and Franklin is not.
That would be bad.
Yeah. Moving on to the potentially more, let's say, meatier discussion, the operating override. Now, this is a $9.175 million operating override, which gets added to the base if the ballot question passes. So right now the base is $407 million, and the base will go up by, again, about $10 million based on that 2.5% increase. So we're saying instead of going up by 2.5% plus new growth, it's going to go up by, instead of saying it's going up by about 10 million plus a little new growth, it's going to go up by 19 million plus a little new growth if this passes. And that base, once it takes that jump up, it continues up at that 2.5% each year, unless, of course, there's an override or an underride, which Proposition 2.5 also allows. So the first question, I guess, is, okay, so what's this additional $9 million going to be spent on? Kathy, I think it's your turn to go first.
Sure.
Some of it's for the schools, right?
Quite a lot of it's for the schools, actually. So roughly half, over $4.5 million, would go directly to the Newton Public Schools operating budget. And then
the budget that you as a school committee member oversee.
That's right.
Or the body collectively oversees.
Yeah, that's one of our primary functions, is to oversee and pass a budget every year. We get an allocation out of the city's budget, and the schools is the single largest component of the city's budget. So roughly half of the operating override funds would come to the Newton Public Schools budget.
What is the school budget these days?
It's a very good question. I should have memorized that number. It's roughly 270,
So we
63.
approved, it came in last year at 262.
262. There you go.
Okay. And so you're talking about adding another $4.5 million to that 262.
To the 262.
In addition to whatever else you'd get as an increase this
Right.
year.
And so what the mayor has informed us is that we would get an increase of 3.5%, which is roughly the city's revenue growth.
Right. That's
So
the 2.5% plus another
plus
percent
some
for new growth.
Exactly. So what she has sort of said as both as the mayor and as a member of the school committee is that the city's allocation to the schools would increase at 3.5% for fiscal year 24.
With or without the override?
Without the override.
Without the override.
So the override would provide an additional $4.5 million, roughly a 5.2 maybe percent increase. There are a bunch of other things in the operating override, some of which are directly school beneficial and some of which are ancillarily beneficial.
So there's
to
something
schools.
for Horace Mann in there?
Right, so $775,000 of the override would go towards a renovation and reconstruction project at Horace Mann. There's some money.
So that's not a whole new school at Horace Mann.
No, Horace Mann, the building at Horace Mann doesn't need to be completely replaced, but it does need an addition, and it does need renovations, especially in some of the common spaces, which are undersized for the kind of school it is. It's an older building, and so when it was built, it didn't provide for the kinds of things that our schools do now. It didn't have a full-size cafeteria, it didn't have a full-size media center, it doesn't have special education facilities like schools would have if they were built today.
And is $775,000 the entire cost of this project?
No, it's not. But it is a contribution to getting that project started.
Do you know what the full budget for the project is?
I don't have that number with me, but I would guess it's in the ballpark of 15 to 20 million.
And so 775,000, it's okay. So it's a small percentage of it.
It's helping with design expenses.
Okay.
The other kinds of things that are in the override proposal, the sustainability and climate resiliency funds, are designed largely for electrification projects in buildings, and so one of the projects that would get funded is a new boiler basically a new heating system at the Pierce School, which is
More
our
efficient, less polluting.
right. So
presumably?
Pierce is actually an oil burning school.
Oh, wow.
Because you can't put gas lines to where that building is located,
Right,
and
right.
so it would go from an burning facility to an electrified facility.
That's exciting.
And then some of these other projects, like the parks, fields, courts, and playgrounds, a lot of those are at or adjacent to school property and are used by our school
Sure.
families and population.
So school sports teams, and my son plays baseball, they play at various fields. Some of the fields are at the high schools, and some of the fields are one's on Elliott Street or
Sure.
Chestnut Street.
Yeah, so it's not only school fields, but certainly some of them will be school fields and used by schools. There are a bunch of other items in the operating
Some
override
trees
as
in
well.
there? It's,
Streets, sidewalks, trees, and also really importantly, services for our seniors. When the new senior center is built, there would be some funding to increase the staffing and programming for the people who use that senior center.
So, I mean, I guess one question, Kathy, that I'm sure a lot of people are asking is, okay, these improvements, these expenditures for trees and streets and Horace Mann, they're one-time capital expenditures. Why can't we use this one-time cash to pay for them? I think Tariq may have already given one reason that some of this one-time money may be earmarked, but
Yep.
isn't there some one-time money that could be used for them?
Well, I think it depends on how you think about these kinds of expenses. It's not that one time we would need more trees, it's that we need trees on an ongoing basis.
Yep.
Trees.
You mean we
trees
can't
are
just repair our streets once and then we'll be done?
Right.
Well, here they are, they're good now.
just like you can't repair your playground or your playing field once. These are ongoing things that cost money on an ongoing
Right.
basis.
So if we built them in, if we used one-time money to raise the amount we're spending in the operating budget on it, then next year we're like, oh, we don't have that one-time money, and
Right.
we have to cut something.
Now you can't
Right.
fix that problem anymore.
Okay, I think you've laid it out nicely, Kathy. Thank you, Tariq. Well, I mean, so I guess I will. Kathy, do you support the operating override?
I do. I very much do. I think I look at it mostly from the school perspective because that's sort of the hat I wear quite often. The impact literally to the schools is devastating without the override. We really need the money.
Tariq, not to put you on the spot, but you came on the show. Where are you on this, man?
I am still undecided just because I still have lots of questions on the override, on the different things that you listed, and on what we're spending it on. And so I still have lots of questions.
Well, fire away,
Yeah, so,
Tariq.
one thing is, where are we now? So one thing that I looked at is, what are we spending on trees right now? I understand that we're gonna, in the proposal, it's 500,000 on, and that's gonna be on an annual basis. But we're spending right now 700,000 on trees, so about almost half. We're gonna almost.
Is that tree acquisition and planting, or is that the whole urban tree?
That's the
budget?
whole forestry tree plantings.
So that-
700,000.
Does that count the salary of the urban tree?
Does not count the salary. That is just for the trees,
for
the
actual-
materials,
the materials
and, yeah,
and the planting.
Yeah, well, materials are
So-
trees, well, mainly. But yes, but other
Dirt, maybe some
dirt and water. Yes,
Shovels,
yes,
I don't
shovels. I think shovels was a different line item, but yes, but we're spending $700,000 right now on trees, and so that's 500,000. So one question that I still, can we spend $1.2 million a year on trees? That is,
What do you mean say can we? You mean are there not enough places to put them?
Well, no,
or
I
what
mean,
is-
can we spend $1.2 million a year on trees? $700,000 is a lot of money. I understand, the cost of materials are going up, inflation and all that, like labor that I get, but, it's 1.2 million now. And as we, and it's great. I'm glad that we're investing more money into tree plantings. But it's going to be 1.2 million.
Is that also tree maintenance, like pruning and whatnot?
I believe so. Yes. Again, I just looked at the in our budget books, and so that's just a general question. But overall, I'm happy that we're investing more in trees. Another one is the $1 million for our parks and playgrounds. Right now, we're spending $300,000 on athletic fields. this is an incredible investment in our parks and playgrounds. I am happy to support, just the $1 million in and of itself. Another one which is not being talked about enough is the $1.4 million in roads and streets and sidewalks.
The mayor calls it street paving and street safety.
Yep. At the November 10th meeting of the city council, when we were talking to the city's chief financial officer, Maureen Lemieux, she explained to us that it is not an increase in funding. It is rather a reallocation of funding, just because I think it's around $9 million in road improvements a year, is that it comes from different buckets. It comes from 3 or 4 different buckets, how they come to that $9 million. And this will allow her to move the money around in those buckets to the tune of $1.4 million. But the amount will stay the same.
So we're not going to do more street paving and maintenance with this?
According to her, no. And it was in the Newton Beacon just a couple of weeks ago that it is not an increase in funding. I was very disappointed when I heard that. And it's not being talked about enough.
That is an interesting.
So yes, and another thing which I didn't know is that in the first year of assuming the operating override passes, let's just assume it passes, the city is legally obligated to allocate those funds to how they say they are. But in that second year, they are not legally obligated to allocate those funds the way how they say they are going to allocate them. So that I found that out at the November 10th meeting. Again, that was coming from the chief financial officer. So these are just some questions that are going through my mind for the last couple of months that, like this needs to be talked about enough, which I wish we had someone from the No campaign here to bring these issues forward. But
they aren't talking.
we don't.
That's not what they're talking about.
I know. Yes, and
So,
then
I mean, I think we need somebody from the city to talk about these
Yeah.
issues. But
Bring them
wait,
on.
we have a counselor here, haven't you? Didn't it say in your? So actually, Tariq, what you're saying is news to me that the first year is even required. I thought when you passed it, it's still a democratic, open, and public process by which the budget gets set. And if the mayor and city council were to say, you know what, even though we said we're going to do $500,000 more for trees, we had a bad snowstorm, we're going to shift $100,000 of that and do $400,000 more for trees. I didn't think that was even binding in the first year. So it's news to me that it's ever binding.
yeah, first year only, second year and beyond, no. And as I said earlier, and I found this out last year, if the city council votes down the budget, it still passes.
Yeah, not that. That's another show because
So-
that's not right.
Well, that is what we were told, and that's what happened last year. The vote was 11 in favor,
You can vote
13
to cut
against.
it. If you vote to cut, yes. If you vote to, the way it works is if you cut an amount out, your cut holds. If you vote the whole thing no, then it goes into effect.
Yeah.
Because if there's nothing else negotiated.
Yes.
So the leverage the city council can have is to say, I'm going to cut the mayor's spokesperson or something the mayor wants. You cut out a few things here and there, and then that's the budget.
Yeah.
And you use that to negotiate what you want. Anyway, we'll do city council or budget strategy as maybe that shouldn't be done on camera. Anyway. Point being that there is, of course, a democratic political process that figures out the allocations in future years, obviously, in a democracy, one would hope. But okay, so you've got some questions, Tariq,
Yep.
on the operating side. It sounds like you like planting more trees. You want to make sure you do more street maintenance. Is that a fair characterization?
That is the number one complaint I get as in my inbox. Can we get some traffic calming here? Can you repave this road? That is throughout the city. No matter where you go, cars are going too fast. They want some raised sidewalks. I mean, raised bumps in in the road. They want wider sidewalks. You name it. That's what they want. That is what our residents want. So I was very disappointed.
So right now it's $9 million.
About it's a ballpark.
Okay, and you're saying it's not going to go to 10.4 with this 1.4?
Assuming it passes, no. Well, again, it will probably go up just with the additional funding.
All right. Well, that is interesting, and I'm going to try to find some information on that and report that back on our next show, and maybe and certainly suggest that the folks that are advocating this provide more information on a little more detail on these items, including the ones that Tariq has mentioned. Kathy, any reaction to any of that?
So I guess what I can say on the school side with respect to the 4.5 million, so the mayor has committed to put that money into the base of the school's budget. So with a one-time infusion of 4.5, the budget would then continue to grow at what the school's annual allocation would be, which for the last couple of years has been in the range of 3.2 to 3.5%. So that money, as I understand it, you're saying it is legally obligated to be spent in that way in the first year. I think once it hits the school's base, then it just grows at the regular rate of growth.
And that's probably true with most line items. They're going to grow at the regular rate.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
it'd be pretty dramatic if they were cut. So while there's a technical legality to this,
Yes.
like there's discretion, the inertia certainly is not to pull the money the next
Exactly.
year.
I'm
Right.
just saying legally. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's
Yes.
and you're sitting here with two lawyers too, so that's
Oh yeah, that's right.
so as I indicated, I'm going to read a little bit of the No campaign's argument on the operating override. What voters should know: historic inflation, falling student population, $63 million from the federal government, and the state's new millionaire windfall on the way. Why an override now? Inflation is already making it harder to preserve our community's diversity. Far too many of our seniors and low to moderate income residents struggle to make ends meet. Many are being forced out of the city. We are told the override is, quote, for the schools, close quote, yet it doesn't provide for hiring any teachers. Our school rankings continue to decline. 1 in 5 students have left the Newton schools. A recent Newton school survey found 69% of parents do not believe the schools are headed in the right direction, and 65% of parents believe school spending is not fiscally responsible. Almost 60% of the city's entire budget now goes to the schools, and that gap is growing. Our schools are very important, but so are our roads, parks, senior centers, first responders, and more. So I think I've put enough of it out there. We can read some more of it in a minute, but I think there's a lot to respond to there. Kathy, let me
There's a lot in there.
Yeah, let me let you respond. I should have broken it down further.
Sure.
To the school part. So they're saying.
So there are a whole bunch of facts in there, or purported facts that I would say are not accurate.
Okay.
So maybe
You
if
want me
I
to
can,
go through them one at a
can
time, or-
can I sort of look over your shoulder there?
Sure.
Maybe I
Well,
can take them.
Let me
Why don't you do it?
read
Yeah.
them and, okay.
One at a
So,
time.
Let's take the school-related stuff.
Sure.
One at a time. Our school rankings continued to decline.
I would say not so.
Okay. I'm not sure where any school rankings are declining. I know that my son's at Newton North, my daughter's at Mason Rice. Son's at Newton South, and daughter's at Mason Rice, and both the school rankings look pretty good for both of them.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're both getting a terrific education, and
I mean, it's hard to know exactly what ranking
Do they
anyone's
provide a
talking
source?
about.
no, they don't. No links, no source.
I mean, if the measure is MCAS testing, yes, as a result of the pandemic, our students' performance on MCAS dropped. Every single student in this, like collectively in the state, everyone's performance dropped.
Right.
The pandemic was really
Not my
devastating.
kids. No, just kidding. Every single student. No.
Not every.
I'm just joking.
Taken. If you look at every district's scores,
Right, no.
we're not alone.
Right.
Yes, do we have
So
work
our
to do as a
our
result
rankings
of that?
compared
Absolutely.
to other schools, though, did not decline, is what you're saying. Okay, 1 in 5 students have left the Newton schools. What about
Absolutely not. So I think that is a fundamental misunderstanding
20%
of some data.
Yeah, that would be.
That's so
How many students are there in the schools right now?
this year there are 11,629 students.
And how many were there last year?
Last year there were 11,717 students.
So wait a second. It's 11,000. So we lost not even 100 students. We lost 88 students.
Right. So
that's not a
so-
20% decrease.
so what I
mean,
think-
I have a Newton Public Schools
right.
education.
So what I think that data point
do.
refers to is the fact that roughly 20% of the school-age children in Newton do not attend Newton
But
Public
that's
Schools.
always been true. People go to
Exactly.
Catholic schools. They go to
The
other
number is
parochial
about
schools.
one-
They go to the preps. What do you call it? The Buckingham, Brown, and Nichols.
BC High, places
Right.
like that.
So
Yeah.
historically, if you look over the last 30 years, somewhere between 17 and 21, roughly, % of Newton kids don't go to Newton Public Schools.
Right.
It's
And we should
about a-
thank those people, by the way, for paying property taxes and supporting.
Yeah, it's slightly higher now because we did lose some students during the pandemic who families who opted to
I
send
think
their
particularly
kids.
with the younger grades, we saw that because
Absolutely.
the online was not.
It's
I mean,
really challenging if you had a first grader or a second grader. I had a second grader in those years. I mean, there are a lot of families who chose to send their kids to a school where the kids could go in person all the time. And that's very understandable, and some of those families haven't come back, but that figure is grossly exaggerated.
Yeah, and the fact that we got the kids back in the classroom, we can thank the State Board of Education and Matt Hills, a Newton resident, for leading that effort to get them back in the classroom.
Your
I think.
predecessor.
He was my predecessor on the school committee.
Yeah, and so that's right. Doing good work at the statewide level on school stuff now. Anyway, so that's not true. 1 in 5 students have left the Newton schools. A recent Newton school survey found 69% of parents do not believe the schools are headed in the right direction.
So I think as part of our superintendent search, our search consultants did do a survey. We had about 1,500 responses. And of those 1,500 responses, that's correct.
Okay.
However, what we don't know is that, look, so it's an important data point. I'm not going to walk away from it, but we have no idea what the parents of all of the other kids in our district
So
think. That's a
it's
very
self-selecting
small
sample of the people who responded, in other words.
Precisely.
So
And
that's not statistical.
it's
Again,
not statistically, it is not statistically significant, nor do we know how representative it is.
right. Well, that's the thing. If you have a self-selecting sample, you could, the people who are upset are the ones that tend to fill out the survey. It's
Right.
not like a scientific poll of a sample of all the parents.
Yeah, I'm not saying
I mean,
it's
I
not,
didn't fill out the thing because I'm happy with.
and I'm not saying it's not important data. We need to pay attention to that. We need
Well,
to.
what are the things people were complaining about? Were they complaining about the things that we were all upset about during the pandemic, like lack of in-person education, or were there more? Were there concrete examples that were given in this?
So there was a sort of a text box area for people to write, and responses ranged widely. Some of it is people are still upset about pandemic-related issues. Some people are worried
People
more.
were very upset about this. I heard a lot of that.
Completely,
and
yeah.
I haven't been an elected official in a decade.
Yeah,
More than
and some people have other kinds of issues. Some people have particular focused issues. Some people have more directional issues. They want to see a different focus. They want to see different messaging. They want to see different emphasis. They want to see more transparency in some kinds of data. And all of that it's all very valid feedback that we need to deal with. I think the point I want to make, though, is those are all sort of issues that we need to deal with on an ongoing basis when we're running a fully functioning school system. We can do things like that. If this operating override doesn't pass, we will be making devastating cuts such that we will not have the ability to pay attention to the nuances that folks are worried about. We will be cutting teachers dramatically. Class sizes will be going up
How
significantly.
many teachers would be cut?
Our current estimate is in the range of 40 to 50 teachers. On top of increased class sizes, cuts in extracurricular activities across the board. It's good. We are not going to be able to provide the kinds of things that our residents have gotten used to demanding from our schools.
Okay, what about this issue of declining enrollment? Why do you need as many teachers if there's declining enrollment?
So,
I think you kind of
imagine.
answered it by
Well-
showing the very small number that
So
things
let
decline,
let me sort of give you a little bit of data. So in 2013, we had about 800 more students than we have this year. When you think about how our schools are constructed, we have 15 elementary school students. So 800 out of, so let's round up a little bit and say we've lost 10% of our students. Think about your average school
It's only
system.
about 7%, but okay.
Fine. Let's be generous and say we've lost 10% of our
Okay.
students. So think about your average school that has 2 classrooms of 4th graders, both with 20 students. You lose 10% of your students. You lose 2 kids in each of those classrooms. You've lost 10% of your students. You don't lose a classroom.
Right.
You now have 18 instead of 20
Not
kids in
unless
that
you want
class.
to do a lot of painful redistricting.
Exactly.
you know.
So it is not a linear allocation between our staffing and the number of students. There's a correlation, and we do make adjustments based on our enrollment declines every single year. That's the first thing we do when we do a budget is we look at how many classrooms we need, and we have definitely reduced the number of classrooms. The thing that people lose sight of is that in the last 10 years, we've added full day kindergarten. And so we've added a bunch of support for that program that we didn't used to have. We've also, over the last 10 years, added a lot of support for our students in the form of interventionists.
You can't mention full day kindergarten without me saying thank you to Emily Norton and Margaret Albright, who championed that in the woods for years before people started paying attention. Anyway, and thank you to the whole school committee
No, but
for passing
you're
it
right.
last term.
And it's been an incredibly important improvement to the service we offer.
I mean, I would say, again, my daughter is in 1st grade now. Last year, got to experience full day kindergarten in person, and it was a fabulous experience. I mean, I know what, her older brother had for kindergarten, which was basically a glorified daycare, Really.
I mean,
Daycare is important.
Yeah.
It
well,
is.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was. I mean, honestly, daycare they're doing more academic stuff in a lot of daycares these days. I mean, like the pre-K stuff for a lot of families, and this was a point that Emily and Margaret and others made, was that kids when they were in pre-K before they went to kindergarten were doing more rigorous academics than they were for more hours a day than they did once they got to kindergarten. So
Yeah.
anyway, a terrific investment in my humble opinion.
But I think it is one of the things we've done in the last 10 years that has taken more people to do. Another big thing we've done is added interventionists in all kinds of ways. Math coaches, literacy interventionists, social and emotional interventionists. And particularly coming out of the pandemic, our students' needs are higher. Those people may not have existed in our buildings in the same way they do now, but they are critical to the functioning of our school. Like, think about what happens if you have a 2nd grader who becomes emotionally disturbed or dysregulated during the day. The schools now have a person who can take that student out of class, give them the behavioral coaching they need so that they can return to learning much more quickly, rather than having the teacher who's trying to manage a full classroom be distracted by trying to address that one student's needs.
And can I just cut it on that?
You can have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have all the time, but the middle school interventionists for the literacy program, as you know, in last year's budget, was pretty much gutted out. I think only 1 position is there now, whereas in last year's budget it was 3.5 positions, and 2.5 positions were cut.
That's true.
And I was disappointed to find out that we are not going to restore those positions that were cut in last year's budget. And I know a lot of parents are still disappointed in those cuts from last year. And that is also another reason why I am still, as they say, on the fence. But,
We did have to make
Yeah.
some tough choices
you did,
last
yes,
year.
I know, yes, I understand. But I was hoping we could bring them back, but it's not in the cards with this override, so.
Well, I mean, ironically, and maybe I'll put my 2 cents in on this. There's been obviously some criticism of the mayor over various issues over time. I think that that putting the override on the ballot was one of the best things she's done. If I were to criticize it at all, I might say it's a little too small. I think a little bit if we could have put the funds in it, for programs such as the one Tariq just mentioned, and there are a few other things. I think it would have been it would have been better in the long run for our community. But I know she was trying to make a fine cut on what could pass as well. In terms of, I want to put my 2 cents in on a couple of these issues. I remember when Proposition 2.5 passed in 1980. Now, I mean, people are going to say, why was a 10-year-old kid paying attention to this? Well, I mean, whatever. Guilty, nerd. Okay, I said it. Yeah, policy wonk came by it honestly. The point is, people were saying, one of the big arguments was, well, 2.5% is arbitrary. Inflation could be more than that. If 2.5% is supposed to be your inflation adjustment, what do you do if inflation's higher than 2.5%? And the answer that the advocates for Prop 2.5 had was, well, easy. You override 2.5 if inflation's higher than 2.5%. And in a bizarre upside-down world, we're now hearing from the opponents of this override, well, inflation's running high at 7-8% a year. People can't afford an override. Well, just as our individual household expenses are going up by 7% a year, so too are our employees' expenses going up by that amount, and so too are our energy expenses, and ultimately our human resources expenses. So if anyone thought when the last salaries were negotiated that the increases for teachers or anyone were too high or overly generous, well, they sure aren't now with the current inflation. So ultimately, if you have inflation, you have a smaller amount of money if you have the same amount of money, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so in other words, $100 today will not buy what $100 did 20 years ago. I mean, in fact,
It just
you know,
won't,
the old,
yeah.
like it was talking to my grandparents about how much it costs to go to a movie. Like, why would you spend $10 on a movie? That's ridiculous. It was a nickel when I was a kid. Well, that nickel was probably worth more than the $10 is today, right? I mean, this is the reality that if we, in fact, do not increase taxes by 7%, we're actually lowering our revenue. And that, to me, makes this, while I've supported overrides and other overrides in the past, this one is the biggest no-brainer of them all. And I just want to say one other thing, and I want to put something on the screen in a second to illustrate this, which is people think taxes are high in Newton. If you look at the other cities and towns that we like to compare ourselves to in the Metro West area, we have the lowest taxes of any of them, and by a considerable margin. We pay about, let's put this on the screen, we pay about 1% of our property value in taxes. So that means, here we are in Newton, we pay about $10 per million. I'm sorry, $10 per thousand, which means if you have $1 million house, you spend about $10,000 a year in taxes. You compare us to Acton, 17.6, that's 1.7% a year. Bedford, 1.2, Boxborough, 1.5%, Carlisle, 1.4%, Concord, about 1.3%, Lincoln, about 1.4%, Needham, 1.3%, Sudbury, about 1.6%. I mean, Waltham is the only one in our neighborhood. Everybody else is considerably higher. Our taxes are low, which is a good thing. We like to have low taxes, but it's not ridiculous for us to move a little bit more towards the middle of our peer group, because sometimes in life you find you get what you pay for. So anyway, we're running out of time, so I just want to thank our fabulous panel.
Thank you for having me
Tariq.
back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
You're welcome.
And thank you to those of you at home for watching. Thank you to our fabulous crew, Will for directing, Aiden, and everyone else here at New TV who worked, and you'll see everyone's names in the credits in a moment. And please, please join us again next time when we try to find just a teensy-incy-weensy bit more common ground.